Oh,
Um,
good morning, Kevin. How the heck are you doing, sir?
oh, I'm doing great, Chris. How are you today?
Oh, we are rocking and rolling. Oh, busy week, busy week. How's your week
Yes.
been?
Same way. It's been busy. We're telling you ahead of time. Got a lot going on. I know you've been super busy. You had to cancel your Wednesday sessions, but they're coming back. This is it. This week you're going to be back?
Yeah. I apologies. I guess for the summer I took a hiatus. This was not a necessarily planned thing, but a string of unusual events occurred. Jury duty, like actual work. I had to do some real work
Yeah.
and stuff like that. Like
Got to pay the bills.
right, right. These lights don't pay for themselves. Um, speaking of which, get your own fabric T-shirt. John Double O. That doesn't.
How much profit margin you have on these
Yeah,
things?
yeah. It's not what you think. I'll say that. Um, but yeah, no. So we've been off for a little while, but we are coming back. That's definitely true. I This Wednesday or next Wednesday, we've got Nicholas Illick. We're going to be talking
Mm,
synapse and data warehouses. So this is something I think is super important for people who are getting into Fabric and thinking about you know like when do you choose Lakehouse or when do you choose a
mhm,
data mart? When do you choose a Lakehouse? When do you use Synapse? And I'm just frankly, I'm really looking forward to this conversation because I think uh, this is going to be a real good one to get into. And there's no one better than Nicholas to go into and explain like why or Nicola,
yeah,
uh, to get into like why you should choose one path or the other. All right.
yeah, and that's a good point. Of all of the people that have done a ton of work in Synapse and stuff beforehand, they have great content coming out. He's definitely one of them that is taking what he's learned over in those other platforms and translating it here and doing a great job at it. So
Yeah, he really
definitely
is.
follow him on the socials and learn.
Yeah, yeah, and oh my, we have Azure Snaps Analytics the official account. Maybe, yeah,
Well,
that's
yeah,
incredible.
see the next.
Oh, so now we know who runs the account there. Yeah, yeah. Roar is exactly right. That's
Yeah.
Mark. Hey, thanks so much for joining us last week for our conversation. Um,
I love that. It was great to have Mark on and to have that conversation happening. I've already referred a couple people to watch that video that haven't seen it yet. It was such a great conversation. I was just glad to be a small part of it. But between Chris, what you and what Mark had to contribute on that, it was. I thought it was great, and I love that you shared the slide deck afterwards. If anybody hasn't seen that, I think you put the link on the video itself as
the,
well as you pushed it on socials, right?
Yep. The link is out in the chat, but or I'm sorry, it was out on the socials, but I'm posting into the chat as well. So like, if you want to go out and check that out and see the like the actual slide deck that we have that went along with it, this was a great conversation on like how do you go from that 1 or 2 person shop, like how do you scale and what's the evolution from going from that small organization to that big organization? How do you
Mhm.
break up the job duties and roles? And frankly, I know there's lots of people in here who are smaller shops or are a medium shop and are thinking about how do you make that progression. I think this was great because we all came in with like some like Mark has excellent experience in that 1 2 person shop.
Mhm.
Kevin, you were great, in like that mid-level SMB space and that
Mhm.
mid-market stuff. And I come from a background that was a very large organization, so it was a fantastic conversation.
Yep.
Do check that out. Um, and good morning to everyone. We're seeing like Aaron and Stina. Good to see you, and Joe. It's good to see you as well. So uh, if you are out and in the chat, hopefully you guys are having a great week as well. I actually this week I got to go to the Wisconsin State Fair. It was fantastic. Um,
Hmm.
if you ever have a chance to go, make sure you get a cream puff. The Wisconsin State Fair puffs are beyond anything you've ever had in that area. I honestly I thought it was ice cream for several years. My wife laughed at me. She was like, "No, it's like whipped cream," but it's amazing. You just gotta check it out. So,
I kind of forgot that the northern states have their state fairs in August because it's
oh
nice. We don't in Texas. I think it's our state fair of Texas that is hosted in Dallas
yeah,
doesn't start until into September.
really?
Yeah, because like right now we couldn't do it during August, right? We're in straight 100 degree. Every day in August
Oh,
will be
sure.
over 100 degrees, right? So
Yeah.
it, yeah, we have to wait.
Okay, that makes complete sense. We had beautiful weather. I mean, it was a little warm, but it wasn't like crushingly warm and stuff like that. So, excellent,
Well,
excellent,
let's
excellent.
run our rules and get into
Ah,
it.
yes, yes. Keep me on track. Thank you, Kevin. Yes, a handful of rules. We are, as always, employing the Guide the Cube rules. So, rule one: please prefix questions with a Q, so that we can get them into our little queue itself. So we can get that up and running. And please, no spamming or repeating questions. We haven't had any issues with that because we've got a great community here. But
Mhm.
if that ever happens and people start spamming or selling crypto or something like that, the moderators, the people with the little ratchet by their name, will come in and block you off. So, um, yes, and Stina's agreeing that it's way too hot to have a fair in Texas. Yes, awesome, awesome, awesome.
She's in Texas. I have an idea where she is, so that's why I also said rodeo. So
Okay. Oh, that's fantastic. Now, and I also understand, Kevin, from watching Twitter that you're now going to have Mr. Saxton at many of your user group meetings. Is that
he made that comment.
yeah?
He moved up into this area. We haven't gone back to be in person, but if I
Hmm.
could talk him into speaking, if Adam, if you're listening, um, I'm sure it would be a reason to get a lot of people to be on prem. So we may start arranging that. Uh, I'm still waiting for Alex to answer what date works for him to do a virtual session. If he happens, I'll say Alex's name 3 more times. Maybe he'll show up.
Yeah. Hey,
Um,
Alex, what date are you going to speak for DFW?
yeah, we've been communicating on Twitter, but it seemed to die down a little bit. But that's okay. That happens. Plenty of time. So yeah, but speaking of that,
Awesome.
I know a lot of people here see Guy in a Cube, and they're back this week.
Yeah.
So if you haven't seen it, and I know a lot of people try to follow that, they had to take a hiatus while Adam was moving around into this area, the wonderful Dallas area, and
Hmm.
they're going to be back this Saturday. So join us there too. We love being in the chat on that and helping out with that live stream. So
Oh, that is fantastic. Aha, 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 aha. So let's yeah, that's great. Good updates, but I think we got a ton of updates, and uh we could then dive right into the updates that are going on in the service. Okay, so let's head on over. Kevin, let's share your screen.
all right, we got a dark screen. Is my screen not showing anymore?
Yeah, I could see it in the little prep view, but not. So let's turn it off and turn it back on again. Oh, there we go.
It's in the small view. Interesting.
There we are.
Okay.
There we are. We're back. We're back. Okay, cool. Nothing like doing it live, folks.
Yeah. You never know what trouble you're going to run into. All right, so
Uh,
so this
oh, hang
blog
on.
post.
Are
Oh,
we? See, people are saying blurry. Is this back? Sometimes it takes a little while for the stream. Better. Good. 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 Okay. Good.
okay,
Let's
yeah.
keep going.
Sometimes it's just a matter of the streaming software catching up, right?
Yep.
Okay. So this was released a couple days ago, and it's a collection of all of the updates that have happened over the month of July. So it is interesting. It's named the July update. It's put out at the beginning of August. And I noticed this pattern with the June update as well, right? Um, the June update was released in the beginning of July. So this is seems to be a lot of the cadence, or maybe it's going to be the new cadence coming out, which is fine. When I went through this in detail last night and actually listened to the video and everything, there's a lot of the things that we've talked about a little bit throughout the month of July. So, I think this is going to be a good cadence. That individual post will come out when the feature comes out and it's available, but then there'll be this recap, this monthly recap at the end. It is a little bit long because it's covering everything. But Chris, you and I were talking about that this morning because we specifically, I'm going to scroll down quickly, everybody, but we specifically looked at the Power BI section and then
Mm-hmm.
compared it to the July Power BI post that came out July 11th. And this was just a recap of it.
Yep.
So this wasn't really, announcing anything new for Power BI, like how the other Power BI blog post does, but it brings everything into one place. So I have seen some conversations around of some people thinking, that's too much. They should do, each individual component as its own. Others saying that they like this for the way that they consume everything. What are your thoughts? Which camp do you fit into at this point, Chris?
Well, I really like this because if you look, there are those sub blog posts that cross
Mm-hmm.
these different products in different areas. So to me, that means that uh, if you want all of fabric, you go to the fabric one, right? If you want the data engineering posts, you follow the data engineering blog posts in Power BI
Mm-hmm.
or data science, right? But you can kind of pick and choose. But if you're like, well, a lot of my work is on the Power BI side, so I follow that blog post. So when that's updated, I go right out and I read all of those items on it. I'm also going to make sure that I'm following the Fabric post so that I
Mm-hmm.
can kind of keep that broad view of everything that's going on and everything that's being released, because there might be some data engineering things that I'm tracking too, trying to keep an eye on. Same thing with data science, right? Like I'm trying to understand when those things come out, right? Like Power BI stuff,
Mm-hmm.
like I stay on, like I'm Johnny on the spot. Every one of those features, I read through and go through all those things and I test them out. I may not do that for every feature on the data engineering or the data science side because you know what?
Mm-hmm.
It's not something that is as pressing in my day-to-day life. But
Right.
by having that Fabric post, I can now see these things all brought together and I can see them all like Stina's calling out like, hey, the consolidated stuff is out there. Um,
Mm-hmm.
that's absolutely fabric. That's that's absolutely fabric.
Good recovery.
Oh yes, that's absolutely fabric. That's gonna be our new expression. I'll get
It's absolutely fabric.
absolutely fabric. Uh,
Fabrics.
yeah. Uh, um, yes. So I like this a lot. I think this is a good call. I know there was like a back and forth on Twitter, like they were trying to decide,
Mm-hmm.
do they just do one? Do they do the individuals? I think it makes great sense for them to have the individual ones so that you can have a focus on it. And frankly, even if they do like a more detailed one, like let's say they have one that is Synapse, that is, like pipelines, or is,
Mm-hmm.
One Lake, or is Power BI, right? Like, or the individual tools, and then they summarize the features inside of all of Fabric. I am down with that. I think that's perfectly fine because I kind of like, as these things come out, some areas you're going to be focusing on, others you're not.
Yeah, definitely. So I see there was a question in the chat from Philip, and Paul already answered that. I don't know if you want to kind of pull that up because it was setting a little bit of context.
Yep.
Um, so asking basically when we're saying Synapse, are we talking the Azure product or warehouse in Fabric? And Paul's response, right, of Synapse experiences in Fabric include data engineering, data warehouse, data science, real-time analytics. But also to kind of maybe get some context, maybe this goes to the statement we made earlier about some of the other people you're seeing blog posts about Fabric and comparing it to Azure Synapse Analytics, right?
Mm-hmm.
That was, maybe you could call it the Gen 2, right? Or this is the new generation or whatever. Um, so yeah, that term is used multiple times. Microsoft did bring it over, to bundle these other services within it. On this live stream, we're usually talking Fabric and not the Azure Synapse Analytics workspaces and stuff. But we might compare it to that. So thanks for kind of calling that out and helping set context, so that we do know exactly what we're talking about.
Awesome. Awesome.
Okay.
Awesome. All right. And now we do have another question. And this is like something that I really like. And you know what? I got to pull an audible on it because I think, well, we kind of talked about this and you can't see it because, you're not able to, uh, you're not able to, see my desktop, so you can't see exactly what I'm doing. But Kevin, we're gonna pull an audible because I got it up and running. My
Okay.
absolute favorite feature right now is the ability to use XMLA endpoints to take a model and point it to Direct Lake and be able to get that up and running. Okay, and so if you're not familiar with this, I've got a link here. Where's my link? Announcing XMLA endpoints. I'll post this into our live stream chat so you guys all have
Hmm.
access to this stuff, so you can follow along. But we're gonna do a live demo that I've only just initially attempted. Um, uh, that I've just tempted myself earlier, so we're gonna
Yeah.
actually even demo that right now. So,
This is definitely something that we literally talked about changing out to this demo because I looked at this XMLA endpoint, which is not on this update, right? I'm assuming it'll be on the August update. I was
oh,
super excited about it as well. I looked at it yesterday, but let's have you kind of run the demo, and then I'll give some commentary from what I saw yesterday as well.
okay. So we're trying to share a screen. Come on now.
Boy, that's getting a little iffy. One of the things as you're trying to share that I do want
There we
to
go.
point out
Yep.
is in order to use the XMLA endpoint to make changes, you need to set on the capacity the XMLA right to enable that. So you have to go
Yes.
into the capacity settings
Yep.
and turn that on. That is off by default.
Yes.
So,
So that's exactly what failed on me.
mhm.
Is so that you do have to go into either your fabric capacities, the one that you have. Oh, they're paused. Okay. Your trial capacity, and you've got to go under Power BI workloads. And this was not a setting the last time I looked at this 2 weeks ago or something like that. So clearly this is an update, but you have to change this from off to read write, okay, and then
Mhm.
apply that setting to it, okay. Otherwise, it's not going to work. But here is what we're going to do, and you're going to see a little bit of the legacy stuff that's out here, but uh, if you followed along, I've got a video out there about like how do you create an AdventureWorks Lakehouse experience so that you can do tests and demos. I absolutely love having an AdventureWorks a data warehouse. I'm sorry, an AdventureWorks database that I could test things out. It allows me to anytime there's an update like that's in July, I can just go in and test these things, and it's 5 minutes of effort, and it's not 5 hours of effort to get that tested, right?
Mhm.
So I've already created my lake house. In my lake house, I've created um, all of the SQL objects. I've created all the views that I want to have on top of my model. So I've created all of those items out there. So I'm prepped and I'm ready so that when the XMLA endpoints came out, I could go and do this. Now I'm going to need a few things in order to do this. I'm going to need to be able to access my where'd it go? I'm going to need to be able to go into my lakehouse, into my SQL endpoint. So that's because I'm going to be able to need the server, and then I'm going to need to go into and take one of my existing data sets that I want to do the conversion on. So if you're like you have a production database and data warehouse that you're doing this conversion on, you've moved those data objects into Fabric. You're going to take that model and you're going to repoint it, right? We want that effort to be very low, and I think it is. So, okay, so I've got this. I'm going to go in and I'm going to grab my workspace settings. I'm going to go to my premium capacities. I'm going to find my my data set little ID is down at the bottom here. Come on now. Why?
Yeah, it's right behind us.
Yes, it's right
Here,
behind us.
let me move.
No, yeah. So I'm going to copy that. Right, copy that. Now I'm going back over my tabular editor. I'm going to open up the model. Right, so file, open. Where is it? Connect to, right? Yeah, connect to model, load model from database, paste that in, connect. It's going to ask me to authenticate. This is my certified data set that I'm going to want to upgrade. So I'm going to select that one that's out. I'm going to choose that. Now, a few things in order to get this up and running. If you look at the blog post, I know these, so I'm just going to like jump ahead on these. First thing we have to do is we have to go into our database and we've got to change it to at least 1604 or higher. Okay, so right now I'm at 1565. I have to change that over to 1604. I hit enter. Right, so now I'm at 1604. Right now, I have already gone in and I've set up, this is my production model that I'm always using, right? So I have a number of things that I've set up when it comes to my production model that I'm always using. And specifically, I've got shared expressions for my database. Oh, come on. And a shared expression for my server. So it's going to be very easy for me to test out to see if this is going to work. If I could just point the database that I want to get all this data from the lake house that I've just created, or if I could have to stay on prem. So I've selected my database variable, and this is if I go and I look, it's the AdventureWorks LH. Right, so I could go into AdventureWorks. LH is a SQL endpoint that I'm going to be connecting to. So all I do is I change my SQL DW expression I'm using to LH, right? And now I change my server instead of it being the local host because I was running this off of a local system. Now I get to move out into the cloud, right? All I do is I go into my AdventureWorks Lakehouse and I click on this little gear up here, and up is going to pop my SQL Server connection string. I'm going to grab this, and I go back over to my file. I'm going to paste this in, and now I've got this set up. So now I've got my model converted so that the server and the database that I'm going to be connecting to is the lakehouse, but this isn't done. Okay, so this is still set up. This model is set up still so that it's going to be an import model. I don't want to have that. Okay, so in order to change that, what I'm going to need to do is I'm going to need to go down into each of my tables in my data model. I'm going to need to change some properties about the dimension and about the partition on it. So I'm going to have selected that partition, and I'm going to come down and instead of mode import, can you guys see this? I want to make sure you can see this.
Yeah, it's a little small.
I have to change it over to direct link. Okay. So instead of it being imported in, I'm going to have to change it to direct link on this. I'm sure if you're a C# guy, you could, someone's going to write like a little plugin to like automatically allow you to like flip this over and stuff.
Yeah, that's going to be the big thing, right? Is you could put the automation scripts against it.
Right. But I'm just testing this out, right? Like I just want to see if this is going to work or not. Now, big thing to note here is that this is now something that, well, actually, I'm not 100% sure, but I believe this has to be running on a fabric capacity for it to work. It will not run on a premium per user. Not 100%
I
sure.
believe that that is true, right?
Yeah.
Um,
Okay.
the interesting part, so just to kind of maybe set up where we're going here, because like you said, we're calling an audible and doing this on the fly. Just before we started going, did this was this successful for you?
Uh, yes. Yep.
Interesting. Because what I would have thought by using the the configuration that you have and reading the article, that would have gone to a direct query setup and kind of used the SQL endpoint rather than the true data lake
Well,
setup. But
so this is if you're using, you have to change it to direct link. You can
no,
choose a direct
yeah,
query.
I understand that. I was thinking that something would fail and it wouldn't work, but please
Uh,
continue.
all right.
I'm learning a ton here because the way I started a totally different way. I started by creating a model up on the service that I knew was set up into direct lake mode, and there's other expressions that it has. So,
Okay.
oh, and Powell is giving us an update here. Direct Lake is supported on Power BI Premium
Okay. And
P. Okay, so yeah, if you
yep.
have the P SKU,
Okay.
yes, I think you were asking if it was on Premium per user.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it confirms it's not supported on Pro, Premium per user, or embedded A SKUs or EM
Oh
SKUs.
yeah. Yep. So there we go. This is a great clarification. Thanks, Paul. So I'm going to have to deploy this back into one of my trial capacities or a premium capacity that I have. Okay. And Stina is asking, so this has to be done via tabular editor. Um, I believe,
Technically, no,
yeah,
but tabular editor makes it a lot easier, right?
yeah.
So
I'm not sure that, can you create one in uh, Power BI desktop? Are those settings there? I haven't checked. I haven't tested that yet.
I let me. I was going to try to mess around with that, so I'll do that a little bit while
Okay.
you're doing this. But I tabular editor definitely is going to make it easier. Technically, like if you look at the blog post, they're using SQL Server
Mm-hmm.
Management Studio, but then you're coding the
Oh,
JSON
okay.
itself, where tabular editor is going to give you a much
Right.
better interface. Could you use Visual Studio? Maybe. I'm not a
Uh,
big fan of
I
how
don't think
the
I don't
tools
think
work in
Visual.
Visual
Well, I
Studio.
haven't used Visual Studio in years, so I don't know.
Yeah,
All right,
I
let's
haven't
complete
either.
this little test, or as far as I've tested. I want to be very clear of what I've tested, what I haven't tested, so that we understand this. But uh, in our conversations and what I've heard, people have tested this. They get to the next point here, and then it fails, and then not 100% clear why. But that's just because we're new. Maybe we don't know what the heck we're doing, and that's fine too. But so I'm going to have to deploy this out into a fabric, either trial capacity or an F SKU, or if I had a P SKU, I'd have to do that. So I'm going to go and use my trial capacity. So I'm going to go to my workspace settings, and under premium, I'm going to get my workspace collection. And again, that's in that awful spot here for this live stream. Hard to find, but I'm going to copy that. And I'm going to come over here and on my model now. And please note, I've got one table has changed over to direct link. Okay. I haven't done all of them. I'm just doing one, right? So that is what it is. So I'm going to say, okay, model. Now I'm going to choose to deploy it out into this server. So instead of data sets where it was, I'm going to deploy it into my AdventureWorks Lakehouse server. I'm going to click on next. And I'm going to say, yes, I want it to be the AdventureWorks Direct Lake data set that's going to be deployed out there. You can see the little precursor as to whether or not it's going to work or not. I'm going to say next. I'm going to deploy these. That's fine. I'm going to choose deploy. Oh, that literally worked the last time, and now I didn't get that error. Must have exactly one partition of source entity. Okay. Well, what did I do wrong on that? Interesting. Okay, let's go back over here. Hold on. Let's refresh. Maybe because I already had one out there. My direct lake data set. Let's delete it. Kill it. Try it again. Deploy. Yeah, the curse of the live demos. We literally while the in the last 45 seconds of the countdown, I was playing around with this because it didn't work. We were saying, we were having problems, we can't demo it, and then it worked in that 45 seconds. And I'm like, we're gonna get to do this, and what do you know? Okay, deploy. Hmm. All right, I don't know why that failed this time, but in theory, that is what you would do to make that work. I don't have more than one partition.
So here's a hot tip
Yeah.
on this. So what I noticed is with some of these now that along with this is if you connected this workspace to the Git
Yeah.
integration, these other data sets would have been added to Git, and we could have gone back and looked at it and had commits and everything.
I did not do that.
I think there's 2 videos that I would recommend from a
Yeah.
couple Wednesdays ago if you want to learn
Oh,
more about Git, Chris.
and I happen to know someone who's really good at it too. I just, yeah.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
think those are the 2
Okay.
videos
Awesome.
I'm
Awesome.
referring
I wonder what I
to.
did wrong here. Data view default, direct link. Yeah. Oh, they all have to be direct link. Okay.
Yeah, that was one of the things that I got into, right, is, Direct Lake doesn't, support mixed mode. So if you wanted to put in, calculation
Okay.
groups, or other type of tables or
So
whatever,
I'm
that's
down
not
to,
gonna be
I deleted
supported.
everything. If that's the case, delete everything. Great. Let's try
Mhm.
this. Right. Direct link. It's interesting in Tabular Editor 3. Hey, Daniel, you have to just change the name in order for a deployment to work. That's interesting. All right. All right. Did it work at all? Oh, no, it looks like that didn't work. So apparently I'm doing something wrong. That's not necessarily a problem with the service. I mean, maybe I have something off in how I've got this set up here. I don't know how, but that's the burden of live demos, right? Is that sometimes they work and sometimes they don't. It's also a brand new feature that's out there. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, so, Paul just mentioned the error message said you had to have a single partition with direct lake mode in place.
Correct.
So we could come up
Yeah,
with a better
yeah.
demo.
This is just something we put together really quickly on the fly. I thought we were gonna be able to show it, but you know, yeah.
Well, but that's okay. Let's go back to my
Mm-hmm.
screen, and while you were doing that, let me tab over. So I got into
Mm-hmm.
Power BI Desktop, and I used OneLake or this OneLake Data Hub connector and said Lakehouse. And I connected to one of my workspaces that has a lake house. We built this out in the past using the World Cup data. And so in the gold layer, I only have 4 tables in there so far. So I brought in all 4 tables. One of the things that I noticed is when I did external tools and I tried to connect Tabular Editor
Mm-hmm.
3 to this, we'll see what screen it comes up on. I get this message. The remote server returned an error not authorized.
Interesting.
So kind of like how if you've used Tabular Editor, as an embedded tool on desktop, if you start off with that mode, you're not going to be allowed to do that, which I thought was kind of interesting. So I did just publish this to the service, and you see that we have my World Cup Lake House Gold desktop. It's got a data report, and it should have that's showing just the report. Oh, this went directly against like the default data set.
Yep.
If we view lineage on this, let's see where that went to.
Interesting.
Yeah, you see that went to the default data set. Okay, I was hoping that I could come into here. Let's see if I just okay, so this is making a thin report in this setup. Okay, make that a little bit smaller so we could see it. Come back to here. Yeah, this is doing a connect. When you do it through that method, it's doing a live connection to the default
Okay.
data set. Okay, that kind of makes sense now. But let me show you how I started looking at the XMLA endpoint yesterday. Is I came into my and notice I do have Git
Mm-hmm.
enabled here. The objects that are supported are being synced over. So we'll start with the SQL endpoint in our World Cup Gold
Okay.
Lake House. And I did start this earlier. Hopefully it'll start up a little bit faster. So we'll go to reporting and we do new Power BI data
Okay.
set. So yeah, your method was, hey, trying to convert something over. This is, starting net new. So I'm going to go ahead and check all four and say confirm. And I'm waiting because it asked me to please wait. It's very polite about this. Okay. So did it add one? Yeah, see, it added this called Lake House World Cup Gold 1, which is a data set. So let me come off here, open data model, right? So we can see this is what the data set currently looks like. No relationships, no anything at all. So I'm going to get back out of this. Oh, that's interesting. I didn't have a new window. I'm going to sync my to my source control. So if we need it, we got a different commit point to come back to.
Okay.
And then let me find my tabular editor. Oh, I closed them all. So this is going to go through authentication. Let me move off so I don't show all my different authentication setups. I already have the XMLA endpoint, kind of like what you said. I'm going to authenticate over on a window that you can't see, so I'm narrating. Okay, so once I authenticate and I'm on that workspace, so I'm going to pick my World Cup Gold parentheses 1 and come back over. And now we see the way it sets it up, kind of like what you were talking about. You're having your shared expressions, right? Your parameters. And you can see it's setting up the database, which now that I look at it, it looks a lot like what you had.
Yep.
But it's using the GUID, I think, for the database name rather than the name itself, like you put
can
in.
do it either way. Yeah.
Yeah, I think so. I think so too. And then we look at the
Mm-hmm.
individual table, and the partitions is kind of where you were at. So if we look at this partition, you can see
Yep.
this mode here is exactly what you were pointing out. It's direct lake for the mode. So that is important. So I think you were
Oh,
on the
hang on a
right
second.
track.
Yours was
Um,
database query
yep.
expression source.
Yeah.
What's
And what you
what's your
notice is there isn't any M code at all here because this would bring up, since I'm
Mm-hmm.
on the partition itself,
How's there not
um,
any
what it seems to have is, I think this entity name is what's important because you see that's pointing back to
okay.
um, to the entity name. Because here now, one of the things that I could do is easily come in and rename this with a space and save this back to the server so that, just showing a simple change, and that save works, right? So I could come in and rename all my columns, all my tables, and everything to hit my how I want to display to the end user with, business friendly names rather than technical names with underscores and everything. Hide anything that I want to hide very easily. Those type of things. And there are scripts out there for doing this in Tabular Editor already. So I do see a big advantage of
Well,
this.
hang on. That says import under refresh policy.
Oh, interesting.
Hmm.
Yeah, this is showing the same stuff that sorry about that. It's showing the same stuff that was in
Mm-hmm.
that article. So I would still believe that this is going to use the direct lake method, even though some of these policies or these other things are defaulted a certain way. I think it's not using every one of the
Sure.
properties type of thing. So, you know, and Paul's kind of putting on here is, still lots of limitations of direct lake. Let's face it. Yeah, I think it's a good step forward because, like I said, I tried to add. I could come in here and create a calculation group
Mm-hmm.
in Tabular Editor, but once I have that, if I try to publish this, I'm going to get an error message, kind of like what you got. Right, is you cannot use direct lake mode together with other storage modes in the
Sure.
same model. Uh, so
Yep.
that was some of the things that I
And
was seeing
honestly,
yesterday.
Mark is right. This is still in preview. Like these things just got released.
Mhm,
One of the things that I'm also trying to remember is that we could entirely be doing this like wrong, or we're missing one little thing.
mhm,
Problem with live demos, like, oh, I thought I got it working, and often I'm right, but sometimes I'm
yeah,
not, and that's fair enough. But Stina has a great question, and
but
I think a lot of people are asking about this. Does XML make things more efficient? And I think I'd like to talk to that really quick, if you don't mind, Kevin, because we just have
mhm,
like 14 minutes left, and I'm going to share my screen and just a
yeah,
handful, a small demo of why I'm all in on XML endpoints for managing our code, for managing what we do, and using either Tabular Editor 3 or Tabular Editor 2 to do these code deployments. Now, frankly, start with Tabular Editor 2 so you can understand this, so that you can articulate the value proposition.
mhm,
Um, but you should 100% be funding and purchasing Tabular Editor 3. License that for you and your organization. This is a
mhm,
mandatory piece of software as far as I'm concerned when it comes to like managing enterprise models. There's no question involved in it. It's so crucial, uh, when it comes to efficiency and
mhm.
deployments and updates and management. And I'm just going to show you a handful of things for that. So in this case, yeah, go ahead.
And can I
Yep.
just ask you one thing? So let's put some context to word around the word
Hmm.
efficient, because where
Yep.
I think you're going, right, is the development effort is extremely efficient through
Hmm.
tabular editor. Does it change the performance efficiency of your data set? And I think the answer to the second is no, not
Uh,
really, right? I mean, it's not changing how the data set performs. It's changing how efficient you are as a developer of
well,
it. Would you
I
agree?
guess I would uh I would say yes, but you could do things like leverage the BPA rules. And I literally just
Mhm.
installed Tabular Editor on my desktop this morning, so I don't have my rules all synced in. But um, uh, Microsoft publishes a GitHub repository that you can automatically sync into your tabular editor, and you can actually run your BPA rules against your model, and you'll actually see how many violations and performance violations you get, right? And you can go to all of those
Mhm.
in rapid succession, and it'll even like prompt you along, how do you fix it, what's wrong with it, why you should consider it a fix. Some you'll ignore, you're like, no, I'm purposely doing this. But
Yeah.
others you can like rapidly make changes and improvements on. And
So I think that that's a good point because it makes your development effort
mhm,
so efficient. You could set those properties that give you better
right,
performance faster. So the end result is you still get
right,
better performance. Like the MDX available in MDX
yep,
attribute, right? That's one of the things that I go into best practices, run that rule pretty much all the time, have it clean it up for me. It's 2 seconds. And now my model's more efficient. So yeah, that's
yep.
a good way to put it.
And you could do all sorts of additional things inside of here. Like, for example, if you're working in Power BI desktop, and let's say you're just using a relatively small model that's 300 megabytes in size, right? That's not super large. That's not this huge, awful thing that you're trying to pull in and leverage. But if you want to deploy a new measure or make a small change to a measure that's out in the service in your model, you have to republish that entire Power BI desktop out there. And if you don't have a super high connection, you're talking, I don't know, how long does it take to for 300 megabytes to upload from your desktop? you know, a minute,
Mhm.
5 minutes, 10 minutes for it to upload. And then when you get it out there, you test it out and you realize, oh crap, it broke something in the service or whatnot. Then you've got to like redeploy it, and you get into this vicious cycle. Whereas here within Tabular Editor, you could just come in and make all these changes. You could do it really, really quickly. It's very easy to make massive changes. Like, for example, like I've got a naming convention where all my base attributes, I'm sorry, all my IDs go in my ID column, and I've got some values here that aren't in there, right? I could individually
Mhm.
type in the ID column here, but because of Tabular Editor, I can select multiple columns on a display folder, type in IDs, hit enter, and they both go in there. Not a huge thing if you're just doing two, but if you're trying to like refactor an entire model, or you have hundreds of these things to go in place to make these changes and work, that could be a huge thing that you're trying to
Mhm.
adjust, right? So right, just makes it so much easier to do that work and make those changes as you're building. And look how quickly I'm in and out of these things. Do you know how long these things take to to adjust? Otherwise, it's crazy.
Yeah. And doing it in desktop, right? Because I think you could set a lot of properties multiple times in desktop, but it's still just so
Yeah.
much easier here. I still just find myself, whether I'm connecting through the XMLA endpoint or I use it as the third party, the external tools. That's the
Hmm.
word I was looking for on a desktop. Whenever I'm changing the model, I tend to find myself just going in the tabular
Yep.
editor, right away.
Yeah, and I am a big fan of here. Let me zoom in on this. If you're going to be organizing your content, you have your base attributes, I'm sorry, your base attributes, your base measures, and your IDs. Okay.
Hmm.
Now, for the most part, all of your base measures should be hidden. That you should never be using these inside your model. Same thing's true of your base attributes, right? Those things, well, sometimes in a fact table, you might have that degenerative dimension there, but you don't need those. You're going to be using your dimensional values, right? So those are all keys and those all get hidden so that all you see in that model uh, are your measures. And it's just that measure folder that's displayed for people, right?
And you could do folders under folders too, right?
Yes. Yep. Yeah. Yeah.
So, like, if you had all those measures and you wanted to group them a certain
Right.
way, right? You could take, you know, a couple of them, right? If I don't know if you wanted to go by average and sum or whatever, but yeah, then you could put another folder level underneath it. So, um, and I find on report development that that helps me
Yep.
quite a bit, right? Because you could get
So
overwhelmed.
put
There you
those in
go. So
sales, and this is something else I just learned you can do. I thought this was interesting. The
it is.
semicolon, right?
I believe
And
so.
then
Yeah. Add another folder name.
now, yeah. So now those measures can be in two places, and you say to yourself, "Why the heck do I want this?" Well, if you're grouping things up and you have a measure that's used in a whole bunch of different use cases, right? Like, oh, used in the context of like, I don't know what groupings you have, but like averages or year to dates or whatnot, you can group all of those items together. But then that one base measure you're using over and over again, you can put that in those folders as well. So that as a report
Hmm.
developer, you're only going into one one folder, open up, dragging in the items that you need, and then you're off to the races, right? It's all about efficiency.
Right. Yeah. You hit on the exact thing is you're doing this to help the efficiency of a
Yep.
report developer. So if you have a report developer that you have some measures that, it's like, hey, you go to this folder and that's going to be the measures you're probably going to use for this
Hmm.
type of report. And a different report developer, you want to say, well, you go to this folder and you need the same measure in both of them, right? It's going to help their efficiency to be able to find it. You're not duplicating the measure, even though it looks that way. You go change the code. When you bring that object up, if you change the DAX code, it's changed in both folders because it's only one object within the database itself.
Yeah. I wonder if in a new can you edit a perspective in here? Properties.
Hmm.
Uh,
Yeah, you set the properties of the perspective, but then you go down to the object itself and add it to the
oh,
perspectives. There's also a
yeah.
macro
Yep.
for perspective
That's what it
editing,
is.
right?
And
But you could go down here and go to the properties. Um, I think if I know where you're going, let's see. Let's go to measure two or whatever, and let's see if so. Folders don't get into perspectives, but if you pick a particular measure itself, if you page down on those properties, you should be able to assign it into a perspective.
okay,
I think it's all the way.
I'm all the way at the bottom. Well, I was going to say,
Oh,
if a user group you could have some users that only have access to this group of measures, right? And then they would see that measure too, and another group that just has access to the whole measure group. Now they'd see the one measure there if you said, okay, hey, reseller sales amount is in both, right, or is in the sales, right? They'd see it in both places, but you could help make that easier through perspectives as well. So, yeah,
yep.
all right, yes,
So good stuff, Chris. We have about
yep,
3 minutes left. So, and Donald put a link into the post. Good old Donald, always
mm-hmm,
helping us out, right? There's ways you could filter with wildcards and tabular editor. So we put a link into that to help you
yep.
see different things. So, you know, Yeah, I know you and I both love Tabular Editor. That follow it all the time, keep it
Yep.
updated,
Yep, yeah, use it all the
use it.
time, and, honestly, I felt there's a whole bunch of, like, scripts that you can add into Tabular Error to make your life so much easier. I honestly, I felt, like, hobbled just showing you Tabular Editor without those scripts because they're so useful. Do check out Elegant BI's content. The Power BI team has a whole bunch of stuff out there as well, but, uh, yeah, do check it out.
Yeah, and uh, have to get the link. Bernard's blog post and everything. He does a lot with
Yep.
C# and a lot of
Yep,
scripts
yep.
and everything.
And Mark's
So,
pointing out the new Fabric
um,
Learn content that's out there. That is really good as well. I have not had a chance to go into that myself, but do check that out.
I think that was the one. It was on the blog post, and it was the new content around learning Lake House. So it definitely is
Yep.
something to be looking at.
Yeah.
Let's
Do
see
check
where
that
that
one out.
was.
But we are really at time.
Yep.
So we thank you all for tuning in and checking us out. We'll be here again next week. We'll be diving into different things in Microsoft Fabric. So come back and check it out. All right.
I will be here.
All right, everyone. Have a great weekend. We'll see you next week. Take care. Bye. Peace. Oh yeah, peace.
Peace.
That's the thing.
Peace.
Baker Tilly Digital combines strategic industry insight and advanced technical expertise to uncover and solve your digital transformation challenges. If you're interested in learning more, check out our website at bakertilly.com/digital.